Yay, it's starting. Here we go.
Hi, I'm Chris Wilson from Grinding Gear Games. Thanks for joining us today as we reveal Path of Exile's next expansion, Sentinel, which launches on PC and Mac on May 13th, and on Xbox and PlayStation on May 18th. Twitch drops are enabled for today's livestream, so make sure you follow the instructions below to link your account and earn your Rapture wings. In February, we launched Siege of the Atlas, an expansion that drastically changed Path of Exile's mapping endgame. It removed Atlas regions and watchstones and introduced the gigantic Atlas-wide passive tree and 4 new pinnacle bosses to challenge. One other very important aspect of the new endgame is its modularity. We designed it in a way where it's easy to expand with more content, and that's exactly what we're going to do. Alongside the Sentinel Challenge League, this expansion doubles down on the best parts of Siege of the Atlas to give you ultimate control over your endgame experience.
Are we getting 2 more dudes?
Here's what you can expect from today's livestream. We'll start with a trailer for the Sentinel expansion, and then we'll go through its content and features in detail, starting with how the new Sentinel Challenge League lets you control your level of risk and reward. We'll then move on to the improvements we have made to Path of Exile's endgame. We'll discuss modifications to the Atlas-wide passive tree, the introduction of 20 Atlas Keystone passives, new variations on pinnacle boss fights, and powerful unique items designed by the winners of our Siege of the Atlas boss kill event. Following that, we'll discuss the type of balance changes we're making, or more interestingly, not making in this expansion. We'll then cover what we're doing with magic and rare monster modifiers, various quality of life improvements, and the full release of controller support for PC players. After showing you our latest supporter packs, I'll head into a live Q&A with community streamer Ziggy D, where we'll answer your questions. Once that finishes, we'll post the expansion's full patch notes. There's a lot to cover, so let's roll the trailer for Sentinel.
It didn't say patch notes on there.
Yeah.
In the wake of your power, something has arisen. Dark Sentinels, hungry for fresh air. But these cruel constructs can be harnessed. Take them, bind them to your will. Test and tinker.
More trees!
And reconfigure. And together, you will find your fortune.
I guess they shoot things in bottom and give it away.
Some Sentinels are powerful. Others are dangerous. But in a world with shifting stars,
oh, Atlas tree
monstrous new threats, and valuable treasures, you will need them.
More beams? Yeah,
The
lovely.
Sentinels await your command.
Uber Pinnacles, Uber Cirrus, very nice. Jesus.
I'm sure you have a lot of questions, so let's get started with a full explanation of the upcoming Sentinel Challenge League. Sentinels are ancient constructs that have been unearthed across Wraeclast. In this league, you will collect these Sentinels and attempt to harness their great power. But this symbiosis is not without risks. Once deployed, a Sentinel follows you, watching and waiting for you to enter combat. As you encounter enemies, the Sentinel will fire a beam that doesn't damage the enemy, but rather empowers them. This not only amplifies the difficulty of the foe, but also the rewards that it yields.
Looks like
There are 3 classes of Sentinels that you will find as you kill monsters in this league.
I think it was just
Stalker
counting down
Sentinels
20
will follow
seconds.
you for around 30 seconds.
Yeah, there you go.
Firing dozens of monsters before they
He just said
dissipate.
follows you for around
This
30
is like
seconds.
a build your own breach or delirium effect, because you control what monsters you're fighting when you deploy the Sentinel, and through various means that we'll describe
Might also
shortly,
go down
you're
per
also
kill
in
or
control
something.
of how much the monsters are empowered. In contrast to Stalker Sentinels, Pandemonium Sentinels are designed for mass area of effect, and typically only fire 1 shot. But this shot really counts, chaining between monsters to affect an entire screen full of foes at once. This class of Sentinel can be very dangerous because it empowers so many enemies at one time. The final class, Apex Sentinels, can only empower rare or unique enemies. They fire fewer shots but have a much larger impact on difficulty and reward. You start with a single slot to equip a Stalker Sentinel, but as you play through the league, you can eventually unlock 2 more Sentinel slots so that you can have 1 Sentinel of each class equipped at a time. Each class of Sentinel can be deployed only once per area that you play. You'll quickly develop various strategies for when each class of Sentinel is best used. For example, saving your Pandemonium Sentinel for when you're surrounded by monsters, or using your Apex Sentinel on the map boss or league content that spawns several rare monsters.
Yeah, no thanks, not buffing trio. Yeah.
Yep, not too keen on that one.
With a full loadout of Sentinels equipped, in every map you'll get to empower bosses of your choice, juice up an entire screen at once with a button press, and choose the part of the map where it's best to empower a series of dozens of monsters.
We're gonna need like fucking
Sentinels
3
cannot be damaged by
keybinds for
monsters in
this.
combat, but do gradually deplete their internal power
That
supply each
sounds,
time you
bruh.
use them. They can be found as you play and are incompatible with traditional Wraeclastian crafting techniques. However, new Sentinels with different properties can be assembled from the depleted husks of others that you have used until their internal power supplies ran out. We'll explain that crafting process in more detail later on. You can find magic Sentinels that have mods on them. These mods can augment the base properties of a Sentinel, extending its duration, making it empower monsters faster, increasing the number it can empower, or even the degree to which the monsters are empowered, affecting both their difficulty and rewards. Some mods will add specific drops such as currency items, essences, or unique items to monsters empowered by the Sentinel, but at the cost of increasing how difficult the monster is to defeat. You can also occasionally find rare Sentinels that have more than 2 mods on them. These are generally quite a lot more powerful than normal or magic Sentinels if you find the right combination of mods. The Sentinels you find as you explore Wraeclast will become more powerful. Some particularly powerful ones with special properties can only come from the process of assembling new Sentinels from depleted ones. While the Sentinels you find generally get better and better as you play through the league, you can also upgrade the behavior and properties of Sentinels through your Sentinel controller. The Sentinel controller is like a runic circuit board. It's what powers your Sentinels and allows you to customize them. There are specific nodes for each of the 3 types of Sentinel, so you can customize the properties and behavior of all of them, or potentially focus on your favorite base types. As you play through the league and kill more and more enemies affected by your Sentinels, your controller will gain power. You start with 4 units, which is enough to power your first Sentinel slot and your first runic node. By the end game, you are able to work up to 30 power units, which is enough for almost half of the controller to be powered at once. So how do you choose which runic nodes to power? You do this by connecting them together with filaments. Power flows from the top of the circuit through the filaments until it is all in use by the nodes you have connected. You can set up filaments in advance and they'll automatically be used as more power becomes available.
That's what we need for our Atlas tree.
Moving filaments around has no cost. It's basically like a planning tool that gradually gets activated as you gain more power throughout the league. So you're not locked into a specific plan and you can respec for free at any time.
At least
some powerful runic nodes require 2 filaments and hence allocate more of your power when activated. Additional Sentinel slots for other types like Pandemonium and Apex Sentinels, for example, require 3 filaments and hence 3 power units each. While it's almost always best to have all 3 slots powered so you can use all 3 Sentinels per area, there are niche strategies where you want to unpower specific Sentinel slots in order to have more power for additional runic nodes, also that you can fully specialize in just 1 or 2 Sentinel types. Just to reiterate, you can change your allocation as much as you like, so feel free to experiment.
Nice.
This powerful runic node allows Pandemonium Sentinels to be used an additional time each area. While this is basically pure upside, you should definitely plan around the fact that you'll be running their charge down pretty quickly if you use this node. This runic node prevents your Stalker Sentinels from empowering normal rarity enemies. While this seems very powerful at first because you'll just be empowering magic, rare, or unique enemies that benefit greatly from the boost of item drops, you should be aware that unless you have a large source of special enemies, you'll be fighting against the flight duration of your Sentinels and will probably want to build around increasing their duration. While the Sentinel controller lets you specialize how the different classes of Sentinels behave, it's generally not necessary to have to modify it for each new Sentinel that you equip. The runic nodes you have chosen represent your overall strategy for each class of Sentinel and rarely need to be tweaked if you swap one Sentinel for another. As you use Sentinels in combat across a number of maps, they eventually run out of charge and will become depleted. but they don't need to be thrown away when this occurs. You can find power cores that let you assemble a new Sentinel with a full charge. This process disassembles two existing Sentinels and creates a hybrid of the two, with their properties combined together. Right-clicking a power core opens up an assembly screen. If you insert two Sentinels and click the Assemble button, a new, fully charged one will be created.
Synthesis, is that you?
Yep, seems like baby synthesis. Maybe we'll get a... This is like 1.5. We need the synthesis 2.0.
This process is a complex and unpredictable one that can either inherit properties from the input Sentinels or potentially produce new ones that weren't based on either of them. For example, the base type of the Sentinel could either be the left input Sentinel, the right input Sentinel, or an entirely new one that can't spawn naturally and can only come from this process.
God damn.
The same applies to its modifiers. You generally get a mix of modifiers from the two input Sentinels,
Typical
but sometimes they have their tiers upgraded or entirely new mods added, occasionally including ones that are exclusive to the assembly process. The end result is that you're usually getting Sentinels that are similar in function to the depleted ones you have combined, but occasionally mutate in new ways, producing results that unlock more power and possibilities. The best Sentinels in the game will come from lucky combinations of depleted Sentinels that have just the right mods. It's also possible to assemble two Sentinels directly into one of the many valuable unique Sentinels. Specialized power cores exist, which influence the assembly process to greatly increase the chances of various interesting outcomes occurring. They don't guarantee anything, but are absolutely worth considering if you're trying to hit unlikely assembly results. You may want to accumulate a small collection of depleted Sentinels so that you have options to assemble together. That's where the Sentinel Locker comes in. It's a free object that you can place in your hideout that allows you to store stacks of each of the Sentinel currency items, as well as a tab full of each of the 3 categories of Sentinel. You can also store Sentinels in regular stash tabs, and they can be freely traded with other players. The Sentinel Locker's affinity for Sentinels will also work with regular stash tabs while this league is active. As I hinted at before, you can find or create unique Sentinels. These have powerful static properties, but because they cannot be combined with other Sentinels, there's no way to recharge them once they become depleted. They are essentially limited use items with powerful
like
effects.
single arch Nemesis.
Let's look at a few examples.
As long as it's not like multiple.
First off, we have the Basilisk. This is a Pandemonium Sentinel that augments its wide area of effect blast with a petrification effect. Any monsters caught in the blast are turned to stone. Rather than being primarily useful for raising the risk and reward of combat like other Sentinels, this one is incredibly useful as an emergency button in combat. By activating the Basilisk, you can freeze most of the monsters around you in place, letting you take control of dangerous situations.
The shortcuts.
This unique Sentinel, the Hollow-Eyed Skull, is basically a headhunter in Sentinel 4.
So you got F1, which is your graphs, and then F2, 3, and 4 for
There are also a set of unique Sentinels that are designed to empower specific named Atlas map bosses.
It's easy for you with your
if you activate one of these Sentinels while fighting that boss, it empowers the boss into an extremely dangerous version that is very, very rewarding if you can defeat it. The highly empowered boss fight is further scaled by whatever mods are on the map that contain it, so you'll want to be pretty careful with what mods you choose to use. On the other hand, its rewards are scaled by reward bonuses on that map, so if you're able to defeat one of these bosses in a juicy map, you will certainly be greatly rewarded.
Because it seams overly complicated.
These highly empowered map bosses are the best source of recombinators.
It might just be nice anyway.
In-game currency item that can be found in the Sentinel League. Recombinators allow you to apply the Sentinel assembly process to 2 pieces of equipment of the same item class, combining them together in unpredictable ways. This process can also rarely imbue your items with exclusive modifiers that don't normally spawn on that type of item.
This could be
While the
pretty wild.
recombination process involves significant risks, you could combine the best parts of 2 rare items together, maybe getting a lucky exclusive mod spawn, and end up with one of the best weapons, armor pieces, or jewelry in Path of Exile.
So yep,
give us a preview.
Sentinels can be deployed while engaging in other league content, so you can juice the risk and reward to quite crazy levels. For example, you could enter a mirror.
But it's like the part of synthesis that no one enjoyed.
Yeah, the RNG, like crafting aspect.
The difficulty and rewards. There are only a few specific areas that Sentinels can't be deployed in, mostly for technical reasons, and those are unique maps, pinnacle Atlas bosses, and the Simulacrum. So that's Sentinel in a nutshell. It's a combat league that gives you heaps of control over the exact risk and reward you encounter. It stacks with other combat-enhancing league mechanics, juices your endgame bosses beyond any kind of reasonable difficulty, lets you play with temporary headhunters, and might even let a few players assemble
Temporary
some
headhunter
rare items if they're lucky.
Yeah, you mentioned that
We're
earlier.
very much
Nice.
looking forward to seeing your stories after you've had a chance to play with it next week.
True.
In addition to the Sentinel Challenge League, this expansion further improves on the new endgame introduced in Siege of the Atlas, its Atlas-wide passive tree and pinnacle boss fights. The new endgame was designed to give you ultimate control over what kind of content you want to play and how difficult and rewarding you want it to be. With the Sentinel expansion, we are doubling down on what makes this new endgame the best one that Path of Exile has ever had. This expansion introduces 20 powerful Keystone passives to the Atlas tree. As you know from the regular passive skill tree, Keystone passives are usually dramatic and build-changing, with both upsides and potential downsides. Each Keystone can completely change the way you play Path of Exile's endgame, and we have designed Keystone passives for many different playstyles and situations. The second big change is that we have introduced these clusters of passives that grant you even more control over what endgame content you encounter. As you know, you can encounter many different types of past league content randomly within maps.
Very cool.
These new passives allow you to prevent content you don't enjoy from appearing randomly, while simultaneously causing other content to spawn at a high
Very
rate.
cool.
Aside from the obvious convenience of only encountering the past league mechanics that you choose, the system is great for target farming specific content that you have juiced on your Atlas tree.
Just get rid of like fucking everything except for one
incredibly
thing.
difficult and rewarding uber versions of 7 pinnacle boss fights, which can be accessed via 6 new Keystone passives. These fights are designed to challenge the absolute best Path of Exile players, and suffice to say, they are brutally difficult.
This is how you get the uber.
Let's take a look at some of the new Keystones and boss fights. The singular focus Keystone makes it significantly more likely that your favored maps will drop. If a map drops that is not one of your favored maps, it will be converted into a random currency item.
Jesus.
This means that you'll exclusively see your favored maps, and outside of
That
that,
seems a bit ridiculous.
This is the realization of the I only want to play one map dream that some players have. It also helps players who are over-sustaining maps and would rather just get extra currency items. The Stream of Consciousness Keystone prevents you from modifying your maps with fragments or scarabs, but means that when extra content is being rolled for your maps, each of the base chances is 50% higher. This is really useful for players who don't want to have to think about juicing their maps and would instead prefer to get a constant moderate bonus instead.
That's kind of cool.
The following 2 Keystones are for very advanced players who have completed their Atlas trees and want to get a very specific outcome with all of their skill points. The Wandering Path Keystone increases the effect of small passives on your Atlas skill tree and disables all notable passives.
Jesus.
Yeah, Mike just sent me a
The
message.
Grand Design Keystone increases the monster pack size in each of your maps by an amount proportional to the number of notable passives you have allocated. However, the trade-off is that small passives have no effect. These 2 Keystones are very good for specializing into maximizing pack size and quantity at the expense of specific league content, which is great for general Magic Find builds or Divination card farmers. The Twist of Fate Keystone changes the behavior of corrupted rare maps in unpredictable ways. Upon entering a map, you may be sent to an alternative map of the same tier with randomized modifiers. All of the master missions, scarabs, and Kirit crafts applied to the map will also be randomized. This process will not pick an outcome that was already on the map, so it always shifts it to a new property that you didn't have.
So wild.
This means that you can play all of the scarabs, master missions, and maps that you enjoy, and any leftover ones can be randomized to new outcomes, which are guaranteed to not be the ones you started with. This may have some interesting economic consequences as well, with players feeding bad scarabs or maps into the Twist of Fate lottery. The Wellspring of Creation and Dance of Destruction Keystones change the ratios of monster life and damage in maps on the Atlas, so that they are more dangerous and less tanky, or vice versa.
That's cool.
These 2 Keystones are designed to be remedial, allowing players with an abundance of offense or defense to normalize themselves so that they can handle the content better. If you find yourself in a situation where you're waiting for a weapon upgrade or can't fix your resistances,
that applies to
then you could
bosses as
allocate
well,
one of these Keystones to temporarily make things easier, before unallocating it later when your build is complete.
But then again, a lot of the
6 new Keystones create uber versions of Path of Exile's possible boss fights.
Bosses anyway.
Benarius, Cyrus, the Maven, the Searing Exarch, the Isha of Worlds, and the Shaper and Uber Elder, who I guess is now called the Uber Elder.
Jesus Christ.
Allocating one of these Keystones on your Atlas passive tree ramps up the corresponding boss fights so that it is extremely difficult. Like, really hard. Harder than saying goodbye to Zana hard.
Uber Elder.
Only allocate these keystones if your character is extremely powerful and you know you can handle the challenge. In general, the encounter's rules are modified to be far more punitive and difficult.
Jesus.
In return, though, you can earn
It's
some
like
very
gauntlet
enticing
mode.
rewards.
This way you get the...
Each of the Uber fights has an additional high chance reward and a chance of getting a very, very rare chase reward. For example, the Uber Maven guarantees an elevated sextant if you're able to complete the encounter. Very rarely, though, you may be able to earn an awakened exceptional support gem as well, such as Empower, Enlighten, or Enhance.
Excuse me?
What?
These keystones unlock crazy battles that will challenge our most aspiring players who are deep in Path of Exile's endgame. They add a new level of difficulty for those who want to push their builds even farther than they ever have before.
Okay, so...
The keystones we have shown you so far are designed around many
Uber
different
Elder
types of
had the
endgame
purple
players.
balls, dude.
Some glass cannon players struggle with defenses but have no problem with offense. Some players want to just play one map. Some players want the difficulty to be ramped
Those are
up
going
and
to
to receive
be
rewards
very
commensurate with
rarely
their
done in
averages.
hardcore.
The keystones also let you identify a specific reward, type of content, or playstyle, and know exactly how you can get the most out of it.
Well, now we know why things aren't getting nerfed this late.
Yeah,
There are
pretty
a number of
much.
other new keystones that
Just
we'll
make the
reveal before
content
release.
harder, please.
Like the ones we have shown you today,
Yeah.
these keystones require you to consider your endgame plan in an entirely
Give
new
more
light.
defenses, please.
We're very interested to see what strategies you will use to try to conquer the new Uber Pinnacle
plus
bosses.
9 levels or something.
Before we
Maybe,
get
unless
into
it
the
does
new
something
unique
different
items, there are a few
instead.
other endgame Atlas changes that we should cover. We are removing Vinctar's Square and Doryani's Machinarium from the Atlas of Worlds
Good.
because they're not
Thank
natural
God.
map
Yeah,
drops.
that's good.
You can still get and play these maps, of course, but they aren't counted for your overall Atlas completion anymore. Their Atlas passive points have been moved to rewards for defeating the Infinite Hunger and the Black Star.
Nice.
We have rebalanced influence altars and maps. They now feel a lot different than they did in the form they were introduced in Siege of the Atlas. Their downsides now feel more impactful and they have more diversity of rewards, including new rewards. The intention is to fulfill the original design goal of having an ultimatum-like choice about whether you want to accept additional challenge for additional reward. We've added better Atlas tree support for them, including 2 keystones that can affect them. We've also rebalanced the drop weightings of the new Pinnacle Atlas bosses, changing the relative drop weightings of their unique rewards and making them more likely to drop Eldritch currency.
Yeah, that needed to happen.
Currently, in Siege of the Atlas, Elder and Shaper Scarabs are basically worthless because their influence is worse than the free influence you can get from the Eater of Worlds and the Searing Exarch. In Sentinel, you can now apply multiple types of influence to one map, so you could have Eater of Worlds influence
Perfect.
alongside a Shaper or Elder Scarab on a Conqueror map. Together, these 3 influences combined have a very large effect on that map, and this will make Elder and Shaper Scarabs significantly more desirable.
Extra juice, extra
Yeah,
buffs.
that's
The
huge
start
for
point of
juicing.
encountering Shaper, Elder, or Conqueror influence and influence items has been raised to level 81 areas.
Okay.
We've also fixed an issue that was causing some players to skip playing most of the contents of maps. On the lower half of the Atlas passive tree, there were a lot of small skills that granted a 2% chance for the map boss to drop an additional map. This meant that it was possible to sustain maps by rushing to those bosses and ignoring every other monster in the map. We have retained the overall bonus, but have changed it so the map drops from a random monster within the map rather than the boss.
Fair enough. That's so weird.
Yeah, that was a soft core strat.
We're also
People were just
addressing an
doing
issue with the
super
way that
speedy
you
and
acquire
running to
Maven boss
bosses.
fight
Yeah.
invitations. Currently, it's possible that you get hit with a bad streak of RNG and haven't found an invitation by the time you have enough bosses witnessed. You can now purchase these invitations from Kirak for a moderate price if you need to. At the launch of the Siege of the Atlas expansion, we hosted a competition that saw players racing to be the first to kill Path of Exile's pinnacle bosses in hardcore solo self-found mode.
Here
The
we
main prize for
go.
doing so was the ability to collaborate with us on the
what's
design of
six
a unique
items is
item that would
document?
drop from a boss in Path of Exile's endgame. 5 of these uniques have been
6.
designed so far and will be featured in this
No, I think
expansion.
he's got like
The
3 or
6th one will
4.
be released once
Oh,
the
yeah,
winner
it's
has time
4.
to
I
design
know,
it,
I'm joking.
very likely in 3.19. Call of the Void is a new cold-themed ring that was designed by Lighty and will drop from the Uber Elder. It causes all damage to chill and causes chilled enemies to shatter on death, as though they were frozen.
Jesus.
On top of this, chilled
That's
enemies
huge.
deal less damage back to you
That is very
based
nice.
on the magnitude of the chill affecting them.
What the fuck?
The only drawback is
ring
that
is
all incoming damage
gigantic.
also chills you,
Yeah.
but there are many ways to mitigate this, and in some cases it's beneficial to builds that utilize
Yeah,
self-chill as part of some
cold
crazy
back in
combo.
meta.
This ring is useful for a wide variety of different
that
endgame
makes
builds.
Cold godly.
Yeah. Especially because it
Echoes of
gives you the
Creation is a
shadow.
new unique helmet, also designed by Lighty, which will drop from the Shaper. It's designed for builds that use Warcries and grants an extra use before cooldown to Warcry skills that are socketed in the helmet.
Gross.
It also grants more damage to exerted attacks based on the number of Warcry.
That's probably what he did, yeah.
It causes you to take damage when you
Where's
use these
the
attacks.
seismic trap one?
The self-damage number looks really scary, but it can be mitigated by various mechanics such as armor, endurance charges, and life recovery. This powerful niche helmet is ideal for characters that try to use as many Warcries as they can.
God damn.
The third lighter unique being introduced is the Burden of Truth, a unique belt which will drop from Cyrus. Broadly speaking, this belt encourages you to have healthy energy shield and life pools and helps you to achieve this by granting you additional energy shield based on a percentage of your maximum life value. The belt both lets some portion of chaos damage hit your energy shield, but also causes some non-chaos damage to bypass your energy shield like it was chaos damage. This is often an upside because splitting damage over both life and energy shield lets you recover both simultaneously. The Supreme Decadence Keystone that this belt grants, which is previously restricted to timeless jewels, causes your life flasks to apply to both your life and energy shield at a reduced rate.
Yeah, that's an interesting one.
Overall, this belt is extremely powerful for characters who can build to have a decent energy shield pool while also using life flasks appropriately. The fourth new item that we're featuring today was created by Waggle. It's an amulet called the Eternal Struggle, which will drop from either the Infinite Hunger or the Black Star.
What a name.
The amulet has a pair of Eldritch mods, and the one that is dominant will be based on which of the bosses dropped it. The dominant mod also controls whether the amulet gives a Malignant Madness or Culling Strike bonus. You'll need to work out which of the two bosses to farm based on which half of the amulet you want to activate.
That's very
interesting. The final
interesting.
unique we're showcasing today was designed by Steel Mage. It's a unique jewel that drops from the Maven. The jewel refers to a random keystone on your passive skill tree and enables you to be able to allocate passives within a radius around that keystone without them being connected to the rest of the tree.
That's
While the keystone itself cannot be allocated,
Jesus
this
Christ.
jewel allows you to jump across great distances on the passive tree in a very skill point efficient way.
That's great.
That's so cool.
In addition to these uniques that have come from the boss kill competition, we have added new unique items to the Uber Pinnacle boss fights that can be accessed through some of the new Keystone passives. These include a different variation of Thread of Hope that can drop from Uber Cyrus, a new unique jewel which can drop from the Uber Shaper, and special Forbidden Flame and Forbidden Flesh jewels which can roll exclusive Ascendancy notable passives that are not available anywhere else in the game.
Really?
Wow.
You'll notice that our last endgame expansion was just 3 months ago, and we're already extending the endgame even further. This is our plan for every expansion leading up to the release of Path of Exile 2. Rather than having a much bigger annual expansion, we plan to add as many endgame improvements into each quarterly expansion as we can, alongside its new challenge league, so that there are new challenges to overcome every time you come back to Path of Exile. One of the subtle but important aspects of our plan is to keep adding powerful new chase rewards to Path of Exile's endgame, so that there are always new reasons to complete aspirational content. The boss kill competitions are great because they not only create these rewards, but also immortalize the achievements of some of Path of Exile's best players. We're going to run another boss kill competition at the launch of Sentinel. This time, players will have to defeat the Uber versions of boss fights that are unlocked by the special Keystone passives. We'll post full information in the lead up to release. We're going to try something new with character balance in this expansion. We're intentionally making no changes to character power. That means no nerfs, no buffs, nothing. Every single build and build guide made for Siege of the Atlas will work exactly the same in Sentinel. You can start planning your league starter right now with full confidence about exactly how it's going to play. However, build exploration is still required in 3.18. Sentinel introduces many difficult challenges, both in the challenge league itself and in the endgame content. And you're going to have to work out a plan to create characters that are able to handle this content. But at this release, you can hit the ground running, knowing with confidence which builds are a good starting point for you. We don't intend to do this character balance freeze every release. For example, 3.19 definitely contains planned changes to character balance. Even though there are no character balance changes in 3.18 though, we have still made some changes to actual game content. For example, let's talk about the changes to monster
getting new skills? New skills,
Magic
please?
and rare monsters in Path of Exile get a lot of their power from their modifiers. We came up with the majority of the monster mods over a decade ago, and only substantially added to them with the introduction of the Nemesis and Bloodlines leagues in 2013 and 2014. These mods are unfortunately showing their age. Many of them are unimpactful, and it's quite hard to quickly read their descriptions in the heat of combat. What we need is a new set of mods that are highly impactful in combat, keyworded with 1 to 2 colored words that are easy to read at a glance, and capable of producing dangerous combinations. This is exactly what we designed the Arch Nemesis mods to be. a replacement
be
for the
so
core monster mod
sketchy.
pool. From 3.18 onwards, all previous
everything
monster mods
gonna
have been
have it?
replaced by Arch Nemesis mods.
Fucking hell.
No other part of the Arch Nemesis League has been retained, so there's no more inventory or recipe management. Magic monsters have one Arch Nemesis mod shared across their pack, and rare monsters typically have 2 mods. However, it's possible to encounter rare monsters with 3 or even 4 Arch Nemesis mods on them.
It's gonna be so hectic.
Synergistic mods can create quite interesting
rewards?
situations in combat. For
I
example,
doubt it.
if you encounter a
Because they're just
monster with both
replacing the
Storm
other
Strider
mods.
and Ice Prison, the Ice Prison may block you off so that you are more likely to run into the
Fucking
lightning
Christ.
from the Storm Strider.
Phasing necessary, lol.
That was all my rips were for
There
the
are others
Arch
over the
stuff.
Arch Nemesis mods before making them core. Some have certainly had their
Jesus.
power reduced, particularly when applied to magic
Thank
monsters.
God.
We have also changed how monster experience and drops are calculated, so it's now far more about the difficulty of the mods than about the proportional size of the monster.
Interesting.
Various Nemesis and Bloodlines modifiers that were not represented in the Arch Nemesis mod pool have been added in different ways. Path of Exile's challenge system has remained the same for the last 21 leagues.
Yeah.
For Sentinel,
All
we had a
mobs
look at whether
too
there were any
scary.
easy ways we could update it based on what we have learned over the last 6 years. Our plan is to retain the model of 40 challenges with rewards that unlock as you progress through
be
them,
like Arch
but with a
Nemesis, I
goal of
guess.
providing substantially more challenge to endgame players and substantially more rewards to go with it, of course. In order to achieve this, we have crunched down the easier challenges so that the first reward unlocks after only 6 and the second at 12. These are equivalent in difficulty to 12 and 24 challenges from the old system, respectively. This change gives us a lot more space to ramp up to some incredibly difficult challenges towards the end, which will take a lot of time and skill to complete. There are now 10 different rewards you can unlock, which comprise 2 complete armor sets, each with a pair of wings. But be warned, the challenges you must complete are much, much harder than any that we have ever set you before.
God damn.
Uh-oh.
We've been experimenting with support for game controllers on the PC version of Path of Exile.
I want the
During the
AoE
Arch
loot.
Nemesis League, we began a beta for controller support and have been making improvements based on your suggestions and feedback. We're pleased to announce that controller support on
Might be time to
PC
whip
will
out the
officially
Steam
launch
controller.
alongside the Sentinel expansion. This also means that Path of Exile is now fully playable on the Steam Deck for those of you who are lucky enough to have one so far. Alongside finishing controller support for PC, we've also done a push on various small quality of life features in this expansion, which we'll reveal over the coming days. An example is that you can now choose whether your hideout portals can be accessed by one of 4 options: everyone, your friends,
nice.
your guild members, or no
Very
one.
nice.
We have also improved how favored maps are selected on the Atlas. Rather than having to click on the map on the Atlas for every slot, you can instead click on one of your existing favored maps to quickly
Hell
copy
yeah.
it to the new slot. This makes it a lot
Very cool.
faster to favor many instances of the same map at once. There are plenty more small QOL features crammed into Sentinel, and we'll cover these over the week leading up to release. Early in the Arch Nemesis League, we debuted Kerrick's Vault Pass. Purchasing this pass grants you access to Kerrick's Vault, where you can claim exclusive unique item skins as you complete map bonus objectives in the Atlas endgame. The Vault Pass for the Arch Nemesis League is only available for a few more days and will leave the store forever when this league ends. There's no penalty for purchasing the pass late in the league after you've wrapped up your map completion. So if you are pleased with where you got to in Arch Nemesis and want to lock in your unique skins, it's not too late to buy your pass now. Thank you to everyone who unlocked Kerrick's Vault. We had a lot of fun putting it together and tried to think of fun ways that unique item skins can interact with gameplay in a visual way. The purchases directly fund development of both Path of Exile 1 and 2. A brand new Vault Pass will launch alongside the Sentinel League. Like the previous one, there are 8 exclusive unique item skins that can be
look at
unlocked
those
as you complete
spiders.
map bonus objectives.
Very nice.
We'll post full details on these new rewards closer
Was
to
that
launch.
power
To buy
charges
either
and
the Arch
frenzy
Nemesis
charge
pass
change?
now, before it leaves the store
Possibly.
forever, or the Sentinel one
think
when the
that might have
expansion
been,
launches, go to
the
pathofexile.com/vault.
Oh, I mean, that's still cool.
Alongside today's livestream, we're launching 2 new series of supporter packs, the Arcanist and
Looks
Reaper
like they've
packs.
done some interesting things
Each
with
tier
these.
contains the pack's full
Hope-
face
hope
value
they
and
got a
points,
preview.
plus
Awesome.
several exclusive
There's some weird shit,
microtransactions.
so that's kind of cool.
These packs are only available during the Sentinel League and will leave the store forever in 3 months. Every
Wait, what?
microtransaction you are about to see is entirely cosmetic and does not affect your character's
Interesting.
Only
progression
having
or
these
power.
for 3 months? Normally they keep it in for 6.
Yeah,
The
weird.
Arcanist pack series contains 7
Going back to
exclusive
the old
microtransactions.
style.
The Cloak of Elements indicates the power of your fire, cold, and lightning resistances on your back. When a resistance is capped, the effect is extra strong.
That's cool.
That is pretty cool.
That's
While
handy.
wearing the Ring of the Black Star,
Pay
your
to
level
win,
up
lol.
effect looks like this.
The fuck?
That's so extra.
In the Timekeeper's hideout, you can use the Chronosphere.
Imagine a
to
whole
change
party
the time
wearing those while
from
leveling.
afternoon to dusk to night.
Huge. I need that. What the fuck? That's a must-have for any hideout person. When portals?
Oh,
Hideout
so
portals?
Cool. That's so cool.
With Chevron's tome on your belt, identifying
Rip money.
items will cause exploding books to appear nearby.
What the fuck?
So you can see when you're IDing things.
The
Very
That's-
nice.
map
that's
provides
so
blossoms
hectic
with
for
greater
in
intensity
town.
as you open higher tier maps.
That's cool.
That's cool. New map device. Very nice.
Jesus Christ.
That's awesome.
With the soul stunning weapon effect attached to your weapon, any attacks that stun will cause your enemies to have an out-of-body experience.
I remember that from Dodo.
Drinking from the searing
Yeah, knock the
Quicksilver
soul out of
flask
them.
causes an explosion and sets your character on fire.
Speedy Quicksilver.
Very
Yeah.
nice. Everyone's gonna be using that one.
The Reaper Pack series also has 7 exclusive cosmetic microtransactions. The Soul Harvester's Cloak's power is based on the number of enemies your character has killed.
That's why they added the /killed command.
With the Belt of the Hive Queen equipped, the
crazy.
flasks you use will cause blood-sucking insects to appear all over your character.
Jesus.
The Ghostlit Graveyard is a hideout where you can control the color of its torches.
Wait, a hideout?
It also
Yeah, the
comes with
other one
6
was a hideout as
exclusive
well.
hideout
Okay, true.
decorations.
I thought they were just
So you can change the lights.
Decos.
That's cool.
Medidrone will
I mean,
follow
if
you
they are
around and use a
decos
healing
from
beam
that
on you
hideout,
whenever
can
you're
use it
gaining
somewhere
life.
else.
Yeah, hopefully.
Thanks, Medidrone. The Underworld portal opens a gateway to Hell.
It's not a bad
Its
portal.
effect upgrades in Part
Looks
2
pretty
and
cool.
again in maps, where it indicates
wow,
what tier
cool.
of map you're playing.
Oh,
Very
that's
nice.
pretty cool.
Yeah. Oh, Jesus.
While wearing the Ring of the Exorcist, any spells you cast will exorcise the ghosts of your enemies if you crit.
Yeah.
While using the Grim Reaper apparition, the Reaper will appear and cull any unique or
That's
rare
cool.
enemies you
That's
slay.
very nice, yeah.
As I mentioned before, these packs are
Guess
exclusive
I'm buying
to the
both
Sentinel
the
League
max
and will
tier
leave the store in
ones.
3
Fuck.
months.
Yeah.
They're available right
these
now
are these
at
are like just different to the old
pathofexile.com/purchase,
ones, which is
and
very
they
nice.
directly
Yeah.
fund the ongoing development of
I'll
Path
never
Exile
use
2.
that. It's way too
So
full on.
extra.
We greatly appreciate your
I
support.
mean, you have to use it when you're grouping with
Yeah.
people just to piss them off.
All of us
Thanks
doing
for
it on
joining
the
us
first
here
day.
for today's report. We can't wait to see you in Wraeclast on May 13th.
And you have to do it during
We'll
bosses.
begin the
Oh,
Q&A in a few
of course.
moments, so please
Yeah.
get your questions ready
So
in
many
chat.
deaths on like any boss.
Everyone leveling up in the middle of fucking Dominus fight against the things before it.
Just don't tell
Christ.
Forrest.
Yeah. What's happening, guys?
Holy shit!
Did they give
Lock up
Dominus a
back row,
new
lock up
slam?
back row.
I swear that was. Oh no, I was gonna say it's
Oh
more
my
than
goodness.
45 minutes. Now it's only been 30 something, 37.
Incredible.
Announcement 2 has not been revealed yet.
Oh, what the fuck? Interesting.
As per the live stream page.
Yeah, weird. Very weird. I imagine that would have been
Also,
something that we've already heard, though, surely.
Maybe.
Do I have my Twitch drop
Either
yet?
that, or they just haven't like pressed the button yet.
True. 82% progress, apparently.
Let's
Cool.
see, buy packs.
Where is it?
Let's see what these cool packs are.
Twitch drop, you go click on your icon up the top right and then drops.
Oh yeah, 82%.
Yeah, it'll be at 82. Yeah, like looking at these supporter packs, yep, easy purchase.
I
Not
mean-
even a question.
When there's a hideout involved, I'm obviously gonna get it.
I mean, it's more like they're normally they followed the same thing for like forever, where it's just like suit of armor, maybe a weapon or something like that. But these are just like
Yeah.
they're just different.
Pretty much.
It's a nice breath of fresh air.
Yeah.
I mean, they tried doing different stuff before when they had those character effects, which like upgrade when you get more kills.
Yeah, true.
I like the purple one, but yeah, that was something different.
So what do you get extra from the $60 to $90 in them?
It's pretty much like three thing. Oh no, $30 just the cape for each one.
Yeah. But $60 seems to have the hideout and most of the shit. I'm just wondering what's missing from that.
In Medi-Drone, you get the Ring of the Exorcist and a Grim Reaper apparition.
True.
The 90. I'm not even sure if that's worth it then.
Yeah, I may not need the $90 ones, to be honest.
Because it's like the Grim Reaper on kill was kind of cool.
The Reaper's kind of cool. But what about the other pack?
It is Ziggy D here.
The other
with
pack
none other than
is
Chris Wilson.
Some sort of sword
the
thing.
The crazy ring at the $30 with a cape.
Thanks for hosting another
portal and hideout.
Ask you some questions.
This $90 pack's Quicksilver.
I mean, I'll get that just for the Quicksilver.
Yeah, probably.
Different to my planned order.
And the weapon effect, I don't remember that, but fair enough.
Does the Medi-Drone actually heal you?
Yeah, the weapon effect is like when you kill stuff, it knocks their soul out.
No, it's just an effect.
Sort of like Doctor Strange stuff.
When you're getting healed from flasks and stuff, which you can see in the UI already, but this is just
anyway,
a different
back to this Q&A, I guess. Buy those after.
To watch another 5 minutes of it.
Showing information that players already have access to.
I enjoy watching the Q&A anyway.
I do too, but I'm getting tired.
Although I have to say I wasn't really a fan of the blood-sucking insects one. Why would I pay money for that? That's horrible.
I reckon it's going to be low-key quite popular, because what's going to happen is the packs will eventually go off sale, people will have it, and they'll forget about it, and then you'll see someone covered in insects and think, what is happening?
No, that's my least favorite thing. Thank you. Okay. So I thought we'd kick things off.
No, Ziggy D, don't swear
Sentinel
on stream.
First. And I wanted to ask what inspirations led to us having a cute little drone league this time around.
Well, we tried not to make them too cute. So our motivation here was that we wanted to have a combat mechanic that was kind of like
fucking raining outside.
Kind of thing, something where you can take combat with you and it doesn't interrupt the flow of gameplay. You know, normally when you're playing like Breach or Delirium, there's a point in the map where we say now it's time for there to be some dynamic combat stuff. And so here we thought, what if we make a mechanic where several different times during a map the player can choose the right time that they get to deploy their Sentinel and have juiced up combat for a while.
Does a design like this happen with where you come up with the idea first and then the mechanics of it follow on, or do you have we want to do this mechanically, try and come up with a theme for this?
We came up with mechanics first. In this case, the goal was to have something which tags monsters around you, making them a lot harder and more rewarding. And then from there, we realized we can have complicated mods on this. And it actually started off with a bit of an organic theme. Like our initial random idea, thrown together on a Saturday was that this was some kind of growth on the character that projects something at the monsters. And that's actually why. So computer scientists in the crowd will notice that the method we use for combining Sentinels is very similar to genetic programming, the concept of taking some properties from one, properties from the other, and having a chance of mutation. And that analogy worked well with the organic side, because you're kind of breeding these growths or whatever, but it ended up working a lot better, in terms of understandability, to have Sentinels that follow you around. And the analogy for creating new ones there is that because the power is depleted, you need to create a new one around a power core, and you don't really know how the Sentinels work. Because they're ancient technology, so you're kind of putting it together the best you can, and that's why you get a combination of properties and also some random quirky mutations occasionally.
Nice. I prefer this approach, I think, for a few reasons, but I'm interested in this idea of fantasy technology, ancient lost technologies that are more advanced. That's a theme I love, and it's something that Path of Exile's been doing more and more over time. This sort of ancient, otherworldly, or esoteric technology. Has this always been a plan for PoE's world building, or is it something that's evolved over time?
Well, there was a bit of it there from the beginning with the Val, right? They're a civilization that clearly has a lot of interesting stuff going on that predates what the player is currently doing by thousands of years. And so we established the fact that they have stuff like floating machines already. Now, of course, the Sentinels are not Val technology. They're something else that players might be able to piece clues together about, but yeah, we feel it's established that there is ancient technology that's honestly a lot more powerful than what's going on in Wraeclast currently.
It's sad when ancient technologies like automatic doors are lost. Too bad. Maybe we'll rediscover such technologies one day.
It's about the weight of the door.
Oh no. Quote. Perfect. So how much harder do the Sentinels make enemies, and in what ways do they make them harder? I wasn't really clear on that watching it.
So they make combat harder in several ways. From your point of view, the monsters that when they attack you, they're doing damage and more stuff, and when you attack them, they're harder to kill. And this honestly varies a lot depending on the rarity of the monster. With a normal monster, which obviously has very low life and damage to start with, they're buffed a lot more percentage-wise than a rare or unique monster. So if we're applying, like, I don't know, this is me picking a number out of the air, like a 400% buff to a normal monster, we're certainly not applying a 400% buff to Katava. And it's in a way similar to Delirium, it did similar types of scaling. Now, this also depends on the type of Sentinel. For example, the one that empowers the entire screen, the Pandemonium Sentinel, it has a bit less of a buff than the one which is specifically there to target specific monsters, or the one which is a little bit slower at targeting ones, the Stalker Sentinel. And all of this is captured in that empowerment arbitrary number that's scored on the Sentinel. And this is just a number, it doesn't directly correlate to a percentage the player can understand, but it is used internally at different, different scaling amounts depending on what type of monster it is. Generally, more empowerment equals more damage reduction, and of course better rewards. Now, the key thing about this is that we've tried very hard to make sure that empowerment is given to you proportional to any, extra bonuses and stuff you're getting. So it's like with maps where you get pack size and quantity and that kind of thing as you put harder and harder mods on the maps. The same thing is true for your Sentinels, that as you make better and better ones, they'll proportionally get better empowerment to go with it.
Okay. I like the idea that this is like ancient lost technology we don't understand, and also the mechanic is a little bit obscure as well. Was that kind of intentional?
We especially don't want people understanding how the combination process stuff works, but yeah, the general rule is Sentinels give you the opportunity to make combat a lot harder than normal, and in return you'll get rewarded. And there are some cases where the rewards double dip, which are quite interesting that I can talk about.
People sorting through like the game code to better understand mechanics like this has been a thing for as long as Path of Exile's been a thing, but how do you design something like that then that manages?
He said he could talk about it, Ziggy. Don't ask a different question.
Well, from a crafting point of view, the rules are all server side, so we can come up with complicated random things on the server and hope people can't reverse engineer it. On the client, though, I believe there's nothing that they can reverse engineer that will relate to this damage stuff, so we pretty much get to make big spreadsheets on our end, implement it to do that model, and try as much as possible to make sure that players are rewarded for any additional difficulty they have. We don't want a situation where you get a bad Sentinel that's making combat harder and not giving you something for it. And so every bit of additional difficulty will give you additional item quantity, rarity, and experience, notwithstanding any of the other bonuses you get to item drops.
I find that like balancing point of like the obscurity versus players, like if something is learnable, then players feel like they maybe have to learn it as well, whereas the opposite is true as if it's unlearnable in an extent. But at the same time, you have to think about whether players can sort of still engage with the mechanic and feel like they're having some level of control over it. Do you think there's like a level of player control here?
Well, we want to make sure that people understand the core principles of it, even if the actual math behind the scenes is intentionally obfuscated. And the principle here basically is, it's like with other things that juice the combat difficulty, is juice it as much as you can, but not too much, otherwise you'll die. And so there's an extreme level of player control here for a few reasons. Firstly, you choose when to deploy a Sentinel in the map, and which Sentinel to deploy. Secondly, you choose which Sentinel you're using, like what mods it has on it. Are you using a unique? Are you using just a regular magic one? Regular normal or magic one? Have you managed to find a rare with good mods? You have your entire Sentinel controller to spec how you want. And if, for example, the Sentinel combat is too hard, there are ways in your controller to spec more in the direction of rewards and less in the direction of empowerment. And of course, respecking there is free, so it's relatively easy to dynamically adjust the difficulty, so it's never too hard for you, and you're just getting constant rewards from it.
Nice. How much is this affecting the reward then, since we're juicing up these monsters?
The empowerment that affects difficulty also proportionally affects item quantity, rarity, and experience. And you can also get these additional reward icons on monsters. You'll notice in the footage, when the Sentinels empower monsters, occasionally you see like a currency icon or something appear above them, or a unique icon. Now, it's worth noting, there's a base level of monsters giving out these reward icons, of Sentinels giving out these reward icons. So even if you have no mods on the Sentinel and no speccing into anything fancy, you'll occasionally get reward icons. But there are lots of mods that will give you additional reward icons a percentage of the time. Now, these mods are factored into the empowerment number, so it double dips where, because the mod is on the thing, the monster is slightly harder, which means that it stacks more rarity and quant as a side effect. And so you get kind of a double dipping effect there, where you get twice as many, effective rewards.
Double dipping. How often do Sentinels drop, and where do we get them?
Well, you can find Sentinels as you play through the game, and they also drop from Sentinel caches, which are you know, scattered throughout the world. They're pretty often. The intention is not that you run out of Sentinels, right? You'll always have Sentinels to use. The question is whether you have good ones or not. And you'll notice they're corrupted, so you can't just drop AUX on them. It is actually difficult to have a constant supply of good rare Sentinels, but you know, you can put the work in, you can spec into this stuff, you can, you know, do clever combining, and we expect that any good player in Path of Exile will generally have good Sentinels that they can use most of the time. And I understand the concerns that this feels like a bit of micromanagement, but it honestly plays pretty streamlined. Essentially, you can use Sentinels for a number of maps, and there are lots available to drop more ones in as they're depleted. And if you'd like to Sentinel enough that you miss it when it's run out of power, then that's a really good candidate for combining, because if you combine two things together and you liked both of them, chances are you're getting something roughly similar out the other end. Occasionally you might get something worse, but sometimes you'll also get something better, and it could get a cool mutation on it where you get some mod which you'd never considered that suddenly starts like duplicating enemies when they're tagged, for example, or doing a lot of other cool stuff. And so we'll see some very interesting things where people are, this is the worst analogy to ever mention on Twitch, but they'll kind of be like breeding a bloodline of good Sentinels, if you see what I mean.
I've been playing Crusader Kings recently. I know all about that. Okay.
I'm going to just switch to Twitch chat. Nice.
How crucial is this like combining up of the Sentinels, and how do you like design a mechanic like this to avoid the like talisman like for the old players of PoE situations where these mechanics become really laborious because there's a lot of combining?
So you don't really combine up through the tiers, you find better tiers of Sentinels. So as you play through the game, you'll find better and better ones. You do combine if you want to have a chance at making Sentinels that have combinations of mods that you like. So the theoretical best Sentinels can come from combining. So in terms of base types, the way it works is there's a progression from low level to high level, just like you know, bows or wands or something like that. And we also have a few other base types that can only come through combining. But once you've got it from combining, you can then potentially persist that one by combining it with other ones and getting lucky. The purpose of combining is when you're finished with two Sentinels you found effective, you get a chance to get something that's moderately similar to what you put in. And that really helps with sustaining rare Sentinels as well as occasionally getting good unique ones and so on. The talisman comparison is a good one, but we have learnt very much from the problems of that league. And the first problem we had with talisman was that the item you were making was competing with amulets, right? You know, it was hard to get good rare talismans, and it was easy to get good rare amulets, so therefore talismans were worthless much of the time. Here, it is hard to get good rare Sentinels, but nothing else can go in that slot, and so it's a bit of a slower item progression than what people are used to. We've definitely designed the combining system to be more of a crafting system, rather than talisman, where you couldn't do stuff on demand. If you wanted to do combining, you had to go and find some stones, do a whole boss fight, etc. Here, you can make new Sentinels wherever you want to.
The item crafting system where you can combine armors in a similar fashion, how similar is that to the Sentinel crafting? Like, will combining a bunch of Sentinels kind of give you an idea of how that's going to then work on items?
Yes, it's quite similar. Basically, we were looking for something you can do to make new, like, you know, really cool rares, and we realized that we have this system that was entirely designed around the genetic programming of assembling new Sentinels, and it would work really well for rare items. And so we basically tried it, and we came up with a bunch of interesting mods that can go on each of the slots, and I think we haven't previewed any particular ones yet, but the announcement page at pathofexile.com/sentinel has a bunch of mods that people can see in the relevant hovers there, and there's some pretty juiced stuff, so to get people quite interested. But the intention basically is, this is not meant to be the way that people make the best item in the game, but it may make some of the best items in the game if they're lucky. And we've had conversations internally that involve questions like putting items that are mirror-worthy versus items that are strange on the other side, and interesting border cases that happen with the rules to try to make items that are mirror-worthy come out that, you know. Anyway, interesting stuff going on with that. So we think that the Path of Exile players will really like trying to model how that works and to get the best value for their recombinators.
That's me every time I craft anything in PoE. This won't make the best item in the game, but it may.
It's certainly a non-deterministic crafting thing, but it should be interesting. And I think especially if some of these recombinators make their way into standard, there could be some interesting things that happen after the league ends.
Are there any like hard rules with this recombinator thing, like for getting the specific modifiers, or is it just kind of going to be like very hard to understand?
It's very random, but I'll be more specific about roughly how this works, and this is probably the most information you're getting, right? So you put 2 items in, and it's going to pick one of the 2 base types. So, for example, it'll pick the left or the right. Now, with Sentinels, it has a chance to mutate the base type into a special one or to create a unique. We don't want the recombination process for your equipment to necessarily just randomly change the base type on you or to turn into a unique, because honestly, sometimes that's going to be worth less than the items you put in. So once it's picked a base type, for Sentinels, it uses that base type, and for your items, it retains all the properties of that core base type. For example, any enchants you've got on it, any sockets, corrupted status, implicits, all of that stuff, you know, catalysts or whatever. This all gets dragged along with whichever base type was selected. Then for the explicit mod selection, it basically puts everything in a pool and selects some subset of it. So you get some mods from one of the items, some mods from the other. Sometimes you're unlucky and get way fewer mods than you started with. Sometimes you're lucky and get a whole bunch of good ones you liked. Then there's a chance for various things to occur, like it randomly tinkering with the tiers of the mods or rerolling values. And of course, it can add special mods, basically the mutation outcomes from a special pool. And that's where the really good Sentinel stuff is. You really want to get that available in the pool of stuff that you're combining, because then you get some really, really powerful Sentinels. Obviously, relatively optional, of course. The Sentinels work well without those mods, but they're a lot more powerful with them. And the same is true for regular rare items. If you are doing this basically recombination lottery, you get the ability to get, like, you know, keystones on body armors and that kind of stuff, which could be pretty useful for some builds.
Fun. That does sound like a lot of fun. Back to gameplay
Yo.
on Sentinel for a little bit. What's to stop players from using a
Always.
Sentinel boss like right before it dies to subvert the challenge?
Right, so basically when a monster is empowered, it is fully healed. And most of the time, Sentinels empower monsters before you get a chance to get to that monster, and so there's no problem whatsoever. If you were to, you know, try to cheese a boss down to low life and then bring your Sentinel out, then yes, you do have to fight it again. It's worth noting, by the way, one of the pieces of consistent feedback we've had internally when people first see our promotional material before they've played the League is they say, well, with Path of Exile clear speed what it is, this is going to be so lame because the Sentinels are slow at tagging monsters and therefore I have to wait for them all the time. When they play the League, they realize it's very, very easy to spec into a Sentinels are very fast at tagging monsters and chain through monsters, and you get multiple beams, multiple chains, lots of tagging speed. And generally speaking, we've tested on very fast map characters, and if you spec correctly, there's no problem whatsoever with the Sentinels staying ahead of you. And of course, you have ones that hit a whole screen at once. The other thing to note is, and this is something we didn't really emphasize there, is the Sentinels tag a specific, up to a specific number of monsters. So this means the one that tags a whole screen, you don't need to go and grab the entire map. Like, you don't have to have this lame playstyle where you pull the whole map to one place and then hit go to get everything tagged. It does have a limit. And this also means that as long as you're killing fast enough and the Sentinel's tagging stuff fast enough that you use its full limit, then it doesn't really matter if it misses hitting a couple of monsters due to you being so OP, because you'll still get full value out of that Sentinel.
Okay. How does co-op work in Sentinel? I'm always interested in this question.
So basically with co-op, we've tried really hard to make sure that it doesn't penalize players. Both players can use their Sentinels in a map. A monster can only be tagged by only empowered by one Sentinel at once, but they can tag more monsters in an instance. When we're doing leagues, we try very hard to make sure nowadays that you're not in any way penalized for being in a party. So technically speaking, yes, playing in a party would let you tag an awful lot of monsters.
Yeah, that's I thought it would only be like the map creator or something, but I like that a lot more.
There's some good griefing opportunities where, like, you know your guy you're playing with is waiting to tag the map boss with an Apex Sentinel, so you just hit your Pandemonium one faster than him and just tag the map boss with really quick. This is immediately what comes to mind for me.
That's fine though, because like if you're playing in a party, you should be like trying to work together, and if you're not, well,
are you sure? My first experience with multiplayer Diablo 2 was we were killing Duriel in a public Battle.net game. This is back like 22 years ago, and I'm playing an Amazon. So Duriel dies, drops Worm Skull, grab it as fast as I can, and the Necro says, "Who got that?" And I say nothing. So that's the history behind multiplayer play for me.
Okay, yeah, that's fair. Oh, that's why we have being able to kill each other at the bandits.
Chris Wilson is
honestly, yeah, it's nice for there to be some sharp edges occasionally.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The bandit one's always like
he's just talking about his first experience playing online in Diablo 2, and he ninjured some guy's loot.
We didn't know he wasn't helping me with Duriel. I was helping him.
It's very different. Okay. Okay. With league mechanics like this, when they're itemized in some way, it inevitably comes up. You have to make a decision about whether they're tradable or not. So what keeping things tradable is often much more in the spirit of Path of Exile, I find. We've sometimes seen this actually makes players less willing to use the mechanic themselves, like for Expedition, for example, where people were selling all of their currency instead of using it. What goes into the decision to make something like Sentinel tradable?
So, in general, tradability is preferred, especially when there's other forms of progression. Like in Arch Nemesis, the mods that you had were your progression. And so if we made those tradable, then you could literally skip the league, find some exalts, trade them for the ability to do the hardest Arch Nemesis content. Here, because you have your Sentinel controller, which powers up as you kill empowered enemies, you do actually have to engage with the league to progress with it, and therefore tradability is totally fine with the items in it. We also wanted to make sure with the combining system that players are able to trade for Sentinels that will combine well together, right? You know, there's one of those things where if you look at your pool of Sentinels and realize you don't have a good combine available, but you have a couple of Chaos Orbs spare, maybe you trade for something amazing and try to, you know, something that's being depleted and try to combine it with something that you liked. This also means that once you've finished with a Sentinel, like let's say you don't like combining, you just want to play with your Sentinels, you can take the ones that were good and rather than combining them, you can trade them to other people to get some currency that you can use to buy potentially full Sentinels or actual items you want to play with or maps or whatever it is you're looking for.
I feel like we're creating cyberpunk scrap merchants now. That's fun. Great.
So I'm looking at the Sentinel
people are asking about
it actually has the awakened exceptional gems there. I can't see a difference. Except they can level up to 4
yeah, exactly. That's what I was thinking. Because they're uncorrupted, so I think the idea is they can level up an additional time, and then you can get them up to level 5.
I know that Beck's like
right, okay.
But that will take a literal lifetime, I imagine.
We have a specific plan.
It looks like they capped it
at
level 4, and then corrupting them is going to be
than the plan of let's just bring it back next league or something. And so we're going to do the
yeah, but imagine leveling it to level 4 if it's the same experience kind of rate as normal ones.
I
mean,
take a lifetime.
Just
fans because you
turn
mechanics and being like it's just like
turn enhancers into
the altar stuff.
Thingamajigos.
Current form will feel a lot more like Ultimatum, right? So they get to go that.
You would not level them naturally. You would definitely use some.
Yeah, that's still gonna take ages though.
A lot of questions from chat.
But,
I mean, yeah,
because it'll be level 4, it'll be exponentially bigger than level 3. It'll still be brutal.
Yeah.
Just like if you have a good one, you just want to straight up recharge it.
We don't have any raw currency that does, but you will be going through quite a lot of Sentinels, and this is intentional. And to be completely honest, I'm going to explain this, right? So we know that it's controversial that these things run out of charge, right? We're not trying to just hurt the players. But in the version of this that we designed, where you use them forever, it was really boring. You get an okay Sentinel on day 2, and you just use it forever. And because of that, we had to make the good mods really rare, and you never see them, and you'll never find a Headhunter Sentinel, and it was terrible. And so we tried this model where they run out of charge, and you're constantly combining stuff together, and you see the full gamut of the league. You try new experiences, and you get to see a lot of the cool mods, because we just ramped the spawn rate of everything. Like, that Headhunter Sentinel, the Hollow-Eyed Skull, you're probably going to find one, right? Like, it's consumable. It doesn't matter balance-wise if you have an insane time for a few maps, and this means that if you want to play with it every map, you just trade for one over and over. And so the model here with the recharging, honestly, is so much more fun than the one where you just get a perfect Sentinel or something good enough a few days in and never touch the league again.
Wonder if there's like a double Headhunter Sentinel if you combine 2 of them together or something. Okay. Carrybag asks, how do you get filaments for the passive tree thing?
It's just clicking on the sections, basically. There are these grooves, you click on it, a filament appears, you click on it, it goes away. It's literally a planning tool, right? There's no item, there's no specking, there's no points. Basically, you have an amount of power that will flow through the filaments wherever you've marked you want the power to go. And so basically, you could Google and find the best filament guide and spec it in on the first day and leave it and never open the panel again for the entire league, and it will magically fill with power as you level up your Sentinel controller. Or you can go in there and tinker with it. And we're far more worried, because a lot of people, when looking at the reaction, were saying this is complicated and involves micromanagement. But I expect, honestly, they'll just spec something that looks good, later change it once or twice, and be done with it for the most part.
What the fuck?
Unless you're a player who
what
really,
the fuck? Ghostlit Hideout is huge.
To the point where we have
I'm about to buy
insane rules.
It's a big hideout.
People like auto hotkeying something where it changes to one Sentinel spec, they release that Sentinel, then they change it to a different, like,
huge hideout.
The abuse case makes this a living nightmare to implement, but we think we've got something that's not going to get in the way of players actually playing it.
I didn't even think about that.
Well, I'm glad we thought of it before the players did, because
yeah. That's good. They're giving us infinite filaments. I'm so excited. So good. A name that is way too long, Namvan, asks, can you use unique Sentinels to make other Sentinels?
They're not currently used in combining, but that doesn't mean we wouldn't randomly turn that on without telling people, if you see what I mean. But go experiment with stuff. This is the fun part of the league. We've got it in testing. It's going to be on alpha probably today for people who have alpha access. Do not email me for alpha access. You will not. Anyway, sorry. Just saving my inbox. We've got it going on alpha. We're going to get feedback, and this is the week where we get to make extra things that are fun, right? We get to look at it and go, maybe we should allow combining uniques or something like that, and come up with some extra stuff. So yeah, we'll come up with some cool ideas there.
I love the idea of combining uniques. That's super fun. With these recombinations, Emrys asks, is there any way to connect influences on items together? Say you combine 2 different influence items together. Can they do the same thing as an Awaken Orb and smush them together?
I'm going to do the dev check on that one to make sure I'm explaining exactly how it works. So, what's the deal with influences?
Well, the short answer is no.
Yep.
The long answer is it picks the non-influence based type. Then it won't be able to select influence mod.
Right. Okay. So when it's selecting base types, it picks one or the other, and if it picks one that is not influenced, it cannot select mods from the other one that have that influence or have influence, because then they couldn't copy across. So the influences have to match in order for it to copy the mod. And there's still so much crazy abuse that players will work out with this kind of stuff. Like, we're coming up with crazy cases here where we have to put contrived stuff in to stop players making insane items that shouldn't exist. And even then, there's going to be a lot of rares that really have impossible mods on them that we are tolerating, and that's only the stuff we can think about. So, yeah.
All right. That answers the following question. Perfect. In that case, we shall move on to the next section. Let's talk a little bit about the endgame Atlas, in particular the passive tree side of things, which was a huge introduction last league and been expanded upon with Keystones this time around. So we're being given a lot more control over our endgame experience now, both these days in general and also specifically now. Like Keystones, for example, allowing us to only drop our favorite of maps, and nodes that disable unwanted league mechanics and such. This and the new passive tree overall feels like a big shift compared to PoE of yesteryear. What's led to the dramatic change for PoE's endgame and like player agency levels?
So, a lot of the time when we change our mind about something or do an experiment is because Path of Exile 2 is in the future. And we want to make sure Path of Exile 2 is the best game for the players possible. And that means, generally speaking, if we've tried something and there's a possibility we want to do it differently in PoE 2, we will try the other thing. And so with Siege of the Atlas, we said, have a ton of control over all this stuff. And players loved it, and it went really well. And so we're giving a bunch more control here. See how that goes. We have a lot of stuff lined up for the endgame updates between now and PoE 2.
Yeah, he was
we'll get a bunch
tired,
of information.
apparently.
And, you know, reserve the right to change things massively.
Okay, let's have a... Jesus Christ, this hideout is enormous.
It's a nice, like,
the other one's not quite as big, but it's still up there.
I tried to buy it and it didn't let me.
Yeah, that does happen sometimes.
We have a schedule. Like, I know exactly how many leagues there are between now and
Sadly, the Chronosphere is not a decoration that you can just place in any hideout.
Really helpful. Like, it gives us an actual runway of knowing.
I wanted to change the day and time.
Right, yeah. You can only do that in...
So we know exactly
the Eclipse.
It's going to finish up and how much time it's going to give us between the release of
and the lever is over
for us to take feedback into account and see if there's any tweaks we'd make to the itemization based on data from that.
How many leagues are until PoE, sorry, did you say?
That's a number. It's a countable whole number.
That's the follow-up question.
Fair enough.
The question I was going to ask anyway. How many leagues until hard mode?
Probably 2. But we can talk about that when you ask the question.
Ah, interesting. There are so many decorations in here already.
Back to the Atlas, though, since that's what we're talking about at the moment. How successful overall do you feel that the new Atlas passive tree has been, and by what metrics do you tend to measure success of something like this when you implement it?
So, we didn't really use metrics. We kind of knew it's awesome because we play the game ourselves and we know it kind of feels right to us. So when we did it, we thought this is cool, and that's kind of good enough. And sure, if players absolutely hated it, we would have had a second thought about that, but we didn't look at metrics, I mean, here's an interesting thing, right? if you said to me, what was player retention like last league, I would have said absolutely amazing. Best people played more and all this amazing stuff. But if you look at the numbers, they quit in droves when Lost Ark came out because you can't miss the release of that game, right? And then Elden Ring came out. Like, there was no way that people were going to get the full in-game experience. But yet, I still feel that endgame had the best retention because the players who happened to not be interested in the other two games played so much more than usual. And so to some extent, because a lot of our community went to play those really good other RPGs, we're expecting this is the actual release of the end game for them. Like, there are so many people who, and we're ignoring the fact that Diablo Immortal comes out in a few weeks, by the way, guys. That's not a game. We're going to play Path of Exile. But because people are sticking around for the whole league this time, they're actually going to have a full league with the new systems for the first time.
That's like,
oh, you just need to walk on it.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Then is that there's always like other things that are going on.
It doesn't send you back though.
I think a lot of people.
No, you have to use the other one. They're one-way portals.
Okay.
Been, especially for me, like
which is weird.
Especially like best end game I've played in PoE, and yet other games came out. Man, I'm sorry.
No, I completely understand. And that was unlucky for us. It would have been great if.
Interesting that they have the sigil for synthesis on them as well.
And with this release as well, it also gives people, because of the static balance thing where there's a balance freeze, it gives people the ability to just pre-plan what build they're going to play.
True.
I wonder if these
cool in-game stuff they can do and have a chance to
is
actually.
Is this decoration?
When our internal staff members worked out due to lack of balance things.
Yeah, iridescent statue.
I started to see people. Like,
I wonder if
same with the crystals, iridescent crystals.
Start testing characters that are already public characters. You know, nothing's changed, of course, because they want to be ready for League launch day, and that gives all of the players.
They're under the crystal tab in decorations.
That's right. Nobody sells them anymore. Right.
Yeah. Surprise nerfs in there, and this went to the point where there were bug fixes. I completely
forgot about that.
I had very long repeated conversation with people say to me, "It's not a nerf. It's a bug fix, Chris, and we haven't put it in because technically it does affect how a build performs. And so we've left bugs in the damn game for this league. They're going to be fixed in 3.19, but you get to use those bugs again if you want to, if that's the build."
Okay, I find that really funny. Oh,
can you hit the thingamajigger?
No, what were we talking about? I feel like we're getting.
Can you not?
It's great.
No, I cannot.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah,
that's good. I guess.
Interesting how the frog disappears as well.
How do you guys feel about where like the concept of tree lock-in is at? That is like the ease and
now the frog's back.
True. It's only at this time of day, I guess.
There's the vendor trade that caps the price from things getting too expensive.
He like moves around the hideout.
We're not seeing players.
Yeah,
can you move that thing?
Nah, sadly.
To some extent, we want it to be expensive to respec, but you know, it's turned out to be in a pretty good place. So we do want to avoid strategies where you respec between encounters and so on. But technically, if you have the wealth, you can do that kind of strategy if you need to.
Yeah, it's kind of in line with the regular passive trees in that regard. The only kind of like friction point that I've thought of there is the idea of like different characters having the same shared passive tree. I love that it's shared progression, but rather if you've got like a bossing character,
can you do it, please? Can I please have my money?
It's awkward that
Yay!
you have like separate trees for that. Is that something you guys have talked about at all?
I'm allowed to spend my money.
We do acknowledge that that's certainly a thing, but we don't have any firm plans for it. There's various repercussions, both from a implementation point of view and in terms of like obviously it lets you then have multiple Atlas specs that you can easily switch between for the cost of just hitting maps with your character, which may be enough of a cost, but we don't have any firm plans. But it's certainly something that's being discussed.
Not in my hideout apparently on this character.
Do you guys have like allocation, like heat maps for the Atlas passive tree? I think I remember you releasing something like that for the regular passive tree at some point. Is that something you look at all?
We can generate the data. We generally don't generate the data. Like,
you know what?
There was an internal joke that we generate stats for news posts, and then we get a chance to see what people are doing. You know, we honestly balance based on actually how things feel a lot of the time, because it's just so easy to look at the stats and completely misinterpret how something, completely misinterpret the stats by accident. There are people who write in by looking at PoE.Ninja and say, because of this percentage, you need to do blah. And when we look at our data just to double check it, it's entirely different because of some, bad statistics used, or that's only high-level characters or whatever. Like, here's an example, right? We were talking about Detonate Dead as a league starter, and I mentioned in conversation it's going to be pretty popular for reasons. And someone goes and looks up Detonate Dead on PoE.Ninja and sees that at the top of the ladder it's not really that popular compared to other builds. Well, obviously, as a league starter is not something that people are sitting at level 100 with. And so So it's super easy if
No,
someone just
wait,
goes and gets
we don't
data to
actually get
cause damage. Like you have to
unlimited iridescent crystals to
So
use.
we try not to
They
pre-generate
are
data to look at and
consumable.
find problems with.
So with this
While it's
hideout, you
cool
get
to have heat maps,
18
I'm sure to make a good
crystals and
image,
6
we haven't
statues.
bothered. And I mean, we haven't made a concerted effort to buff or nerf.
I wonder if they'll
mechanics
sell
on the
them
Atlas tree.
separately,
We'll
or
just
if it's
fix
just
a
a
few
limited
specific things
exclusive
like
that
certain
we'll have a
types
certain
being too
amount
strong,
of.
But generally speaking, this isn't path of nerfs for the Atlas tree.
Good question.
Maybe for
Sound
the
like-
older stuff, but you know that's pretty obvious there.
It sounded like you might have touched on my question there, my follow-up question, which is about the balance between Exarch and Eater of Worlds influence. In particular, it seemed like one was significantly better than the other.
Yeah, the patch notes are coming out just after this chat, so people will be able to see what we've changed. And our goal was to make Exarch as valuable as Eater, so hopefully we've managed to achieve that.
Cool, great. So, I'll answer some of my following questions.
This is my
we're getting,
little hideout if you want to come have a look.
And you mentioned
I will.
plans to keep expanding the endgame until PoE2. Does this mean that
I wanted to see if I could get it first, but I couldn't, so...
Sure.
Atlas tree and so on?
We have not actually had an internal discussion that's brought up masteries and cluster jewels and stuff. Aside from when you showed me a draft of some of these questions and I asked the team what their thoughts were. That was the first time we actually discussed the concept of masteries and cluster jewels for the Atlas. So the intention is that we come up with things that make sense for it being an Atlas, which could be masteries and cluster jewels. Maybe those are great tools, right? But we'd have to actually work it out based on what the Atlas needs at the time.
It's kind of nice. I think
I can see masteries the cluster jewels one was
the
like
blue map device might work here. The new one.
But then
Yeah,
again,
if it's not too
I feel
large,
like
because it is a large map device.
We'll see.
Throw a tier 16 in there and see what happens.
In what ways are you folks looking to expand PoE's
With the new one.
period between now
With the new one, yeah.
So
actually,
you're probably going to see more player agency and more
Sure.
rewards for engaging with difficult content. There's kind of this thing where a Path of Exile player will get to the end game, and then they'll be like, I guess I'm done now, I've done my stuff, got my character finished. And the more stuff we can make it really clear of, actually, if you do this thing, you could get this reward. Like the challenges, for example, all these Uber Pinnacle fights. The more stuff we can dangle in front of you, the more time you will play. And maybe the more time you play,
it's softcore, you know.
And so this is like a business plan of give people more game, and that means more player agency, more rewards, more content. We have a plan for actual end-game content we're going to roll out, and you'll see it in coming expansions. Like our goal is that we never have a live stream where we just say, oh yeah, the end game's finally left it how it is. Our goal is
Didn't for me.
Stuff just accelerate.
It opens?
Until PoE2.
Yeah, it's fine.
Well, the idea of you guys do a live stream, you're like, didn't do it.
Are you on Vulcan still, or did you try
liked the no character balance? We also did
DX12? True. I'm on DX12, but obviously Vulcan shouldn't crash anyway.
And to be honest, we're really excited that we get to work on the end game every week, because previously we kind of had this policy of just touch it once a year and touch it.
Change the portal to the new one as well.
It feels stale. And if you were to ask me what one of our biggest mistakes was we always come out with leagues that at least I find compelling, and they're generally pretty good, but when we leave the end game alone, people get to the end game, they've played the league, and then it's kind of just on faith that they keep playing, having some fun, but there isn't new stuff to do necessarily, so that's why we want to make sure there is new stuff to do when you get to the end for
what is the new portal
all the time going forward.
Underworld.
Success. I'm excited to see a more consistent role of end game changes, especially I think it gives.
I should probably just type it in instead of flicking through all these. There it is.
Hey, the early game experience is changing in a big way soon, so we can't just focus on the end game.
Oh no,
it's kind of nice.
There we go.
We have a question from a lot of people in chat, kind of translated, which you kind of touched on.
Any more of those maps?
With changes to the Atlas trees and for example,
any more maps?
Yeah.
That would give.
I just want to keep. I want to close the portals.
Yeah, that's hard to do these days because they load in really quick.
They do! Yeah. They really do!
You pretty much just have to go into each one of them.
Yes, the tree has changed, and that will change what builds you want to play, but they will work the way you expect, which is the key thing, right?
Yeah, I was annoyed by that the other day too when I was making my map because I wanted to see the portals and stuff, and then I was like,
there's new challenges that are very hard.
I need to add a close map button to the map device or something.
Where you can juice up these map bosses to be very hard is also very hard. Your 317 builds may not be the right ones, but if you take a 317 build guide, it will function. There is no hidden nerf that prevents it from doing so, and there may be incidental stuff that goes much further than just the fact that monsters can get more life if you spec a Keystone and that makes your detonate deads better. It does scale DD, right? Yeah. Okay, just checking that. I talk for ages, but the builds from last time will work as the important part. We are not saying that the best build from last time is the best build from this time. So you must think before picking your build, but you can trust the build guides you read.
The thing will actually apply to DD.
That is
what thing will?
Interesting, like refreshing kind of. I don't know if it's refreshing.
Monster Life mods on the
true.
apply to DD.
In the future,
Yeah,
we are not saying the builds stay this way forever. However, this time they do.
Okay, yeah,
maybe,
it gets an extra
you know, if people like that, we might do it again in the future sometime if it makes sense.
So that's as big as it
gets.
Let me right click on you.
Changes to be excited about, but I don't
so
know,
we can remove these portals, see how big the thing is truly when it's closed.
There's not like a bunch of balance changes.
True.
So maybe it's like an every now and then thing. It does seem alright, but I guess we'll see how it feels after actually playing League. Yeah. So those keystones that change the health and life, do they affect pinnacle bosses or just maps?
They affect monsters in your maps, I believe. How does this technically work?
Yeah, so maps on the typically just refers to the maps on the Atlas and pinnacle.
Right. So yeah, in case Andrew wasn't loud, the maps on your Atlas are always affected by your Atlas tree when it's worded like that, and the pinnacle bosses
it's not,
typically not
it's
maps on the Atlas.
Definitely smaller than the other one.
Visually, yeah.
Specifically.
Yeah.
There's
Until it like
one
opens.
keystone per uber fight, which is pretty clear that it makes it really hard. Oh, and here's the thing, by the way, random rant.
Like,
what we learned from the Maelstrom of Chaos back in closed beta was that you have to have a cost for accessing in-game content. The reason why we made the map system where it consumes the map is so that there's a cost to trying. If you want to try a red tier map, it's going to cost you a lot, right? A whole red tier map. And the reason for this is because we found that players would play the hardest content of the game and then die and then be very angry and complain and quit. So typically, if you have high content, you have to gate it behind it being hard to get to, like the Simulacrum or blah blah blah. Problem is, the absolute hardest content is gated behind petals. Keystone. So
when you go down tiers,
the Uber fights, you probably can't complete them. So it's not the case that you should allocate the keystone in order to have a normal Path of Exile experience. This is going to kill you.
That is
right?
interesting.
Like, you have to be really good at the normal Uber fight before the normal pinnacle fights before it's worth allocating that keystone. So just get your regrets ready for unallocating that.
One last one.
Seeing how hard it is.
It's like one of those warning labels on it you have to tear off first before you
back to a tiny flower.
Teeny tiny flower.
Yeah.
I should have
We've
put the
had
fucking
non-constructive arguments
Underworld
internally about
back
whether
on.
this is technically Path of Exile's hardest
Oh,
content,
well.
where the answer is,
It'll just be white.
look at how hard it is. Or
all.
I've come up with a contrived example of some other stuff, but as an example, you know the
I
theater,
mean,
for example,
actually,
it's got lots
what we
of
can
bosses.
do
It's
is
probably
put it
on par
on,
with that, or a bit above, or a bit
and
below,
go to Act
depending on
1.
the individual fight. But that's kind of the scale here. You don't just walk into that
The
fight
coast.
expecting it to be straightforward.
Oh yeah,
And so
true.
these are certainly the hardest, like solo boss fights with just like one or two bosses in them.
Yep, that is certainly a shitty
Speaking of,
portal.
Yeah.
Content. Are the monsters from the new influence types seeing any
Starts off
changes?
pretty boring.
In particular, springing to my mind.
It's not terrible. I don't mind it, but
Here, about 80 of them at the same time and start shooting me.
it'll probably look best around a small
So,
map device too.
we nerfed the
So
burning
like fit
ground
together a bit
from
better.
one of the Eater World's Alter mods that affects influence monsters. It was like a burning ground on death that's scale based on attack damage, and certain monsters had really high attack damage, so they had off the charts burning ground. That's been fixed. And we'll keep the tentacle miscreations as they are for you, Ziggy.
No! There's another Ziggy under the box moment. Great, thanks. Okay. Oh no! I've been giving the 10-minute warnings. Alright, let's go. So, Arch Nemesis modifiers are replacing old Nemesis and Bloodline modifiers.
Okay, let's see what it looks like on a small
punitive
map.
and scary
Nice.
mechanics like disabling leech and combos that led to
That's
truly
not bad.
unkillable nightmares. I made a monster where I invited like the most OP people
Yeah,
we could
a little bit
find
more
in the
dense.
map, and they couldn't kill it. However, we have control over making these monsters every time, but now it's random. And I know a lot of the time it's going to be like 2 or 3 mods, not 4 a lot of the time, but still, I need reassurance, Chris. I'm very scared.
So there's a lot of balance changes for the Arch Nemesis mods, and most of them are taking things that make sense in the context of Arch Nemesis and that don't make sense in the core game and fixing it. So for example, in Arch Nemesis, you're always fighting just one monster, and it's one that you can control what's on it, so you can pick. But in the core game, it could be several monsters with a mod near you. Like maybe you've got a magic pack, or maybe you've just hit multiple rares near each other. And so an example is the mods that make all of the damage freeze or stun. And of course that's a problem if there's just monsters all over the place that are doing like entirely freeze or entirely stuns on you. And so that stuff is being fixed. And like the Ice Prison mod disabled travel skills, whereas now it doesn't, because you kind of can't control when you run into it. So all of the stuff that required a little bit of foreshadowing is a bit less punitive now. We've also globally nerfed Grasping Vines, like, you know, not related to Arch Nemesis in particular, but certainly affects it. The other thing is that in Arch Nemesis, each mod had a multiplicative life bonus, and so there were some very, very, very high life rares. But when we've integrated it into the core game, they don't have such a bonus. Like we've kept the monster magic and rare life about the same as it was before. And it doesn't come
the slash kill stat tracking is
to be clear, that doesn't mean that the rare monsters
from this point onwards.
They were
it doesn't.
Too easy before, we feel.
We don't have data from before it.
The basic idea is you play Path of Exile, and you can kind of zone out and kill the monsters.
So all of our characters have 0 kills.
Everything's good. And then you run into, occasionally, a certain combination of rare mods that causes your character to have to pause and do a different strategy. And that's how it's meant to be. That generally, rare monsters are fine for you to kill, and sometimes they're hard. And people can try to argue they don't want a game where sometimes it gets hard, but the game we're making is one where sometimes it's hard, and that's done through rare monster mods, plus like things like act bosses and stuff that we can custom design. You could use the Diablo 2 example of like multiple shot lightning enchanted monsters, right? You can kill most of the rares and then you run into one of those and you have to be very careful, at least back in the good old days. So we do have combinations here that are hard, and we feel that something like turning off leech for a specific monster is not the end of the world. There are other ways of having to recover life, and if this is a game where you cannot be permanently leeching and occasionally you need another way of getting life, we don't feel that that is too bad. But we will make sure that things that are completely out of control are fixed, and there is a long list of changes. Actually, to clarify, there isn't a long list of changes. There's a lot of changes, but the patch notes basically just said we changed a bunch of stuff. It was getting completely out of hand to document it all, and it doesn't really matter because it doesn't affect your builds a lot, so we only covered important points, but the nitpicky detail I don't think is there in the patch notes for these changes.
Okay. We're going to speed through some more questions here. Are there any new skill or support gems this league? A lot of people asking.
No, but we may have made some awakened exceptional support gems and hidden them away behind really hard bosses that no one's actually going to be able to kill and has a very rare chance of dropping them.
I love it. Awakened exceptional support gems. It's perfect. Yeah. It reminds me of some of the really, really long old support gem names we had. Hopefully we get back to those. Those halcyon days of 18-word long support gem names. Okie dokie. Do we have any... Oh, yes. This was the question about hard mode. We're circling back to that now.
Oh, wait. We've got hip attachments now.
Hard mode?
That's a new MTX slot.
Hard mode is still being worked on, but it is a second priority. And what that means is, if a league is great and everything is fine, and we're going to put it on schedule and high quality, and everything's perfect, we work on hard mode.
Hip
and if it is not
that's a
going
new
to be
one.
fine, and we need to work on the league, we will of course 100% do that. So in no way are we letting hard mode stuff sacrifice any actual work from the core game. And this has meant that in some 3-month periods, we just haven't touched it. And it's also tricky because it requires time from a lot of senior people, right? Like, you know, Mark, for example, who is knee-deep in, like, complicated Path of Exile 2 stuff right now, has to be dragged out of that to work on hard mode for bits and pieces that he needs to work on. Yeah. It's tricky to find time. So we do have a schedule.
Oh, you can have both of the rings on at once.
Like released by the end of the year. We want to make sure we do it right, of course, but that's what we're looking for. And because it's announced, we can be open with this, right? Like, it's not a secret. There's not going to be a big, you know, like, there won't be a live stream where we say, surprise, hard mode's ready. It'll be the case of, remember that thing you've been testing for a while? Well, that's getting formally released with some prizes for a competition or whatever. So we will be very open about it.
And there's the amulet skin, which is separate to the apparition.
I think so,
now.
but not quite soon. Like, I'm
currently, I think the only amulet skin is the victory one.
We'll halve those numbers.
Victory Royale one that you got for killing one of the bosses.
Visual clarity in Path of Exile.
Fair enough, true.
So over the years, Path of Exile.
There'll probably be one for the new vault.
Earlier, screenshots and videos that are still floating around.
Actually,
it especially feels that way when you
the new vault has a couple of items in the Sentinel page.
Yeah, I did see that.
All work really well
bit of a preview.
Did
you see, actually, one of the big things was the merged items, create powerful items section.
I did see
that, actually.
Did you not notice the 100% increased global defense?
Yeah, so it honors fractured. Yeah. So it honors fractured items, which is crazy. Or maybe it can honor fractured items. It still could maybe remove that. I don't know.
So we're not
the way that Chris Willis sort of implied that it worked is that, like,
thing we could do would be to pause
when it merged the items, it picks a couple of mods and then puts them on. So clearly that's come from...
It can do that. The results are unpredictable, as it states there.
And so because
they
can
merge
lessons from 15
the best results or change it completely.
Design stuff in a way where when it scales up, it doesn't lose visual clarity when it's stacked with other stuff. And so the PoE2 team, who are working on the version we're all going to eventually be playing in a few years, they know this and are working for it. So the question is, what are we doing for PoE1? And any new
also,
stuff we make involving effects, which are very hard to make
flask applied to increased effect.
Yeah, that's one of the new modifiers.
Genius.
Alchemist Genius is from the Essence.
No, I know, but those two mods together.
Yeah, it's crazy.
We make sure that new stuff that we make works well from a visual clarity point of view, and we do invest occasionally a bit of work in making sure that certain other old effects that are terrible from a visual clarity point of view are improved. But to be honest, a lot of the old PoE1 graphics get mostly thrown away when PoE2 comes out and replaces a lot of stuff. So, and by that I mean skills and so on. Like the campaign, yes, that will exist, but the campaign doesn't have visual clarity problems. And we will be
I'm guessing it'll take the base type from them randomly when merging them.
Yeah, he said that earlier. It picks, like, it's a 50-50 chance.
Yeah, unless they're the same, obviously, but yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's still a 50-50 chance, but they're both the same options. So.
Yeah, that'll be the way to do it in most cases, I guess.
I mean, I guess item level might matter.
More progress in that. A lot of people have also been asking in chat about Loot 2.0 as well. I know we've had, like,
you get the really shit item level and a really good one. Maybe we'll be able to cheat on like fucking tier 1 life roll
first
onto
thing
level
is,
1 chest.
Hard mode is going to be good for people that really want no clutter. Like if they really just want it so that items are special when they find each one, they go play that as kind of perfect. The second thing is we have been doing things like reducing the number of times you find currency item and increasing the stack sizes, and basically working towards decluttering. We also had some experimentative changes related to decluttering, which were deployed months ago that no one has noticed yet. That means that it hasn't had an effect on the economy, and it hasn't had an effect on.
It is just patch notes.
Item drops
Good night.
notice, and we'll gradually continue to tweak that.
I will read the fucking patch notes
would never be picked up
in the morning.
And so,
all good.
The better we get at that, the better it is. I just don't want players to feel that we're culling items that are valuable to them, because we're really trying very hard not to. And the basic goal is, I mean, I know we're going over time, but at the end of the day, there are two ways to declutter, right? Way number one is to leave the spam of rares and uniques that people are used to, right? This really rewarding thing where there's quite a lot of item dilution. Leave that in place because people like it, and to reduce clutter of other things, in which case at the end of the day, there's a big pile of yellow items on the ground. And I think we'd be lynched if we did a solution other than that. Or to actually like solve itemization issues with the game and say, look, rares should be special, blah, blah, blah. And that's what hard mode's for, right? We get it. A lot of people like the reward spam. And so because of hard mode, there will be a way where rewards are very, very, very precious, and they can play there if they want, in my opinion, superior experience. But baseline PoE will probably still not have substantial drop nerfs, at least during PoE 1. And then of course for PoE 2, we can look at what makes sense, knowing what players like, but also knowing how that game works.
Awesome. Well, I've been giving the time warning quite aggressively, but just kidding. Thank you very much, Chris, for spending some time with us and answering some questions today. I'd appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Thanks for suggesting stuff. It's been a pleasure. We'll see you guys next time.
All right.
Very much.
That's your release.